my name's Dr. Canha-Knight. I'm a technical strategist at SUSE. This is Roger Clarissa, product manager at SUSE. And thanks for joining us this morning for this, this Birds of a Feather session. You know, really just going to be more of an informal chat between us lot in this room. I submitted this session because going through the session listings for KubeCon over in Europe when I was there, and there were a few sessions on diversity, but most of those sessions were targeted towards female representation in tech or towards BAME representation in tech. And there was very little mention of things in the area or issues that affect lots of us in this room, and LGBTQIA+ representation in tech, both in organizations and the community. So Roger and I wanted to submit a session to see if we can kind of discuss some of those issues with the people in this room. So we came up with just three kind of introductory questions, so to speak, or some kind of questions to guide us. But I'm a white cis gay man. I'm not representative of this community in its entirety at all, and I'm not one to gonna preach about some of the issues that affect us, which are wide and varied. So we really wanted to hand the floor over to all of you lot really that have turned up today. So I'm going to run around with the mic, yeah. Yeah, we've got Roger here as standby if we've got a shy audience, which given the topic is probably quite doubtful. But yeah, so who kind of wants to kick us off with voicing an opinion on the one of the questions up there.
Yeah, and I also want to badger you again to make it really audible. The mics will be here, but if you want to move forward and make it just more of a chat of folks sitting together, that would be really pretty great. And that gets the same no response it usually does. Okay.
So do we have metrics on this, or how are we, tracking this?
So from my understanding, there's very limited kind of metrics available on this at all, and most of the metrics, when I kind of went out in research for this session, were purely based on user opinion surveys more than anything else. It can be quite a hard thing, I think you'll find, for employers to kind of gather metrics on. I know in the UK we have equal opportunities monitoring, as do many other countries, but where that data goes and access to that data, I think is quite limited. Do you have anything to add, Roger?
I actually don't have an answer for that. Actually, that's part of the question.
So the Kubernetes community, and so I lead our LGBT employee resource group at Groupon. And at Groupon in our workplace, we do self-identification. A number of other companies do that, including Facebook and Intel. One of the things I wonder is in a open source community, in order to get better metrics in doing profiles of contributors, opening it up to self-identification and also for gender fluidity and gender non-conforming, in order to actually figure out how is our community represented. I'd love to just kind of put that out there. It seems to be quite effective, at least in corporations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does the Kubernetes community have an emissary from this group who can onboard other people?
Is that an answer to that question?
Hi, I was a diversity recipient for the KubeCon Europe. I'm involved in the SIG Contribute experience and the SIG release. So if you have any question, you can ask me directly.
Thank you.
To to your question on having self-identification through like open source community, like profiles, etc. Given that GitHub is online and a lot of online spaces are not necessarily as safe, it feels like having self-identification isn't going to necessarily give the community back the ability. Like, if you feel safe to self-identify as that, that's great. But in terms of getting like larger metrics in that and having that self-identification feels a little disingenuous given very, very common issues with online harassment.
Thank you.
Recently, I saw that Go was taking a developer survey of they were just trying to get some feedback on the language, and I noticed that when you were able to fill out what your gender was, you were at least able to identify in whatever way you wanted, which they got a lot of feedback that people felt like they weren't being erased, like their identity was at least there to fill in. And another comment on something that we've had work well at my workplace was hackathon projects. We've had a lot of people who are in this community contribute to our platform. For example, we implemented a whole custom gender system in that, and it was all led by employees because honestly, we weren't getting help from management when it came to doing that kind of stuff. We had to do it ourselves.
Thank you. And
just recently with the Kate's, it used to be, was it Kate's Women channel in Kubernetes? I guess that's more of an example of unconscious bias. We kept saying informally to people, oh yeah, but you're all welcome, but we couldn't even bother to change the name to like explicitly welcome people, so we changed it to Kate's Gender Minorities, I think. And the same thing happened for the Empower Her event, where people were implicitly or secretly welcome to come, but then again, you had to ask and know and feel like you shouldn't have to ask if you're welcome, but you should just be made welcome. So I hope that's something we can keep changing and making it more raised up to people who are organizing all these events, so it's not simply just women. I don't know if anyone else has run into this, but I like the change we're seeing, but I want more.
Yeah, I kind of noticed yesterday that there was an event that was whose title was diversity with no other qualifiers in it, but it was specifically about women projects.
It was not specifically about women because I was in the event, so everyone can go to the event. So
Which one are you talking about?
the Empower event. So
Excuse me?
The Empower event, it was Monday night.
No, I'm talking about the session yesterday on growing diversity.
Oh.
And that was for women, talking about the challenges of women, and specifically the subject of, but I may not be the main breadwinner and I may have kids to deal with and so on. So it was, on the way out I said, this is really enlightening but really staggering, heteronormative as well, to one of the panelists.
It's very complicated.
Yeah.
So 2 points to yours. One thing that we've noticed in order to be more inclusive is not just to every single minority and demographic minority, but also adding the and allies to every single piece. And I've seen this with nonprofit organizations who have omitted that and being exclusive as opposed to being inclusive. And I know that just sounds like a continuing HR pitch, where you need to make sure that everybody is inclusive. But the problem is that we do need straight allies. We do need cisgendered white men to be a part of the conversation, because they are the ones that sometimes they're higher up and that they can pull us up with them, which kind of sucks that we kind of have to rely on that. But if we completely exclude everybody else, I mean, that's one thing. The second point is I've been trying to work more and more with local LGBT organizations, and it seems like the most common thing is our demographic, especially for people that are trans, people that are of color, trans people of color, do not have the resources to being able to ramp up on complicated software pieces. So when I am going to HR and talent acquisition, I'm saying I'm looking for LGBT people again and again and again and again. They're saying, okay, show me where the source is. And I find coding boot camps is the primary piece. And I would love to hire more from coding boot camps, but sometimes there's just not the appetite for it from management. So I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, I'm in a privileged position right here, and I want to make sure that I'm pulling up other people with me. In this kind of case with Kubernetes, this is complicated crap. It's really, and so I want to figure out, like, does anybody have best practices in order to pull other people up? Because that's one of the things that we need.
So I'm a maintainer of an open source project, and I've been trying very hard to get more diverse contributors. It's a matter of actually the one thing that this person had said was that, I don't know, what was your name? Okay, the fact that everything on like source code related is online, and the internet is a dangerous place for minorities. I mean, that in itself restricts or intimidates, or is a blocking factor for people contributing to any open source project. So I suppose I can call myself a member of a minority population. I'm a maintainer, and I'm still not able to get people from my own population to contribute simply because it's scary. So what I have been trying to do is actually go up to people in person, introduce myself, and start a conversation and start, gaining trust as just face to face, and then later reaching out online. And it's a lot of hand holding, and it's a lot of work, and it's hit and miss because they may or may not like their experience, but that seemed to be a reasonably good way of reaching out and pulling them over. But you have to do the work. And I don't think many maintainers have the bandwidth to do that work.
It seems like there is like clear overlap here with ContribX, and like they have best practices and kind of processes for this that we can probably contribute back to immediately. And if the anonymization piece is like important to us, then we should work on that.
So I had a question kind of based off something you'd said. So I had a general question, and I don't know if this is like totally space for it, but I went to a coding boot camp, and I came from a very religious family. I have not had a lot of support as an adult. And it's something that is, I think, really hurting me in some ways in either finding or keeping jobs, because people look back at different parts of my life where, if I was homeless, I have gaps there. And I think those kinds of things actually play against some people in this community who may have had a different route. So that's just kind of a question in general, is that are there limits to people who are teaching themselves how to code or going to boot camps, are people who are talented in some way, but because of actual like legitimate reasons don't have a good job history, don't have a lot of stability? And are those things limiting people in getting jobs and maintaining a presence and maintaining the ability to then pull other people along? Because you might look at another person who's got seemingly unstable background just because they didn't necessarily have the kind of support that other people might have. So.
Just a general question. Who here knows about or is on the LGBTQ Slack? Why aren't you in the KubeCon channel? But that's a huge resource there. There's job postings all the time, able to connect with other people. And if you are interested, I don't have any responsibility there, but I just want to make sure it was out there. If you go to lgbtq.technology, there's a sign-up form.
Thanks for sharing that. I definitely wasn't aware of that at all.
Yeah, on that same topic, so I'm involved, I'm from St. Louis area, and we have a regional tech Slack too as well. One of the things that's really been kind of cool has been, we've got a really great amount of diversity kind of at the top of folks that are adminning the Slack. And so we have smaller safe spaces for women, for folks that are in the community, LGBTQIA community, even within that. But it's so hard to find folks and channel them to those opportunities. I'm on the LGBTQ tech Slack, and I think it's a great opportunity, but there's still so many people that I meet that don't know about it. And I don't know if it's because we're not asking where these safe spaces are. Has anyone thought about kind of how to advertise these things in a way that, is getting the message out, but then also not putting it out to public internet where, there's a lot of toxicity and hostility that we don't want to invite into these spaces?
I actually can respond to that. There's a bunch of organizations. We have, at least I can speak here for Seattle, we have Lesbians Who Tech, which is actually Lesbians Who Tech and Allies. Leanne Pittsford, absolutely wonderful woman. She's based out in San Francisco. And then you have Leanne Krause, who's the site lead, in addition to 2 other people. I've worked with them for years. That would be an example of a closed channel in being able to reach out. The other thing is your local LGBTQ center. For Seattle, that's Gay City. Over in Chicago, it's Center on Halsted. These are examples of kind of closed ways of being able to reach out. I actually completely agree. I don't think that we should put it on an open channel, and now I feel remiss that I was just thinking about let's just run with it. But no, that's right. Let's pull it in. I think that would be very, very good. I have a general question. So whenever I think about LGBTQ employees, not open source contributors, so those are 2 different problem sets, I always think about, okay, are we sourcing candidates? Are we retaining them in the pipeline because that's unconscious bias? Are we giving them the opportunities inside the company, and then are we losing them? And I'm always able to separate it out. For this group right here, if there was a specific problem that we want to address, not just talk about in general terms, that I could leave the room and say, okay, this should be, of the bucket of things that I should be looking at, this should be one more bucket in the technology space. I would love to have a takeaway from this conversation.
So I think that we need to educate employers on how difficult it is for transgender individuals to apply. There are 2 main considerations. One is figuring out what name under which to apply, whether it's our legal name or our actual name. And then the other one is having to explain, shit like which of our references know we're trans and which ones don't. And that's very prejudicial for candidates, and it would be nice if on career pages, employers made it more clear, that they're affirming of the candidates.
One thing I'm curious if anyone does, I've been on the applicant side of things recently, and it's been hard to suss out different companies' attitudes towards trans people, and I don't know how to make that clearer up front to say maybe make LGBT employees available to applicants to talk about it, because it's upwards of 90% of the people on the interview panels and stuff are definitely not LGBT. It's all straight white dudes. So it's hard to get a feel for what it's actually like being an LGBT employee at different companies without going through side channels. So I don't know how to make that part of the actual applicant funnel.
So not to not to drop your question, but to your question earlier, it can and very regularly does. There's a number of internal and third-party like hiring and auditing companies out there that are available to really like pull out some of those biases against like having homelessness backgrounds. So I didn't know if your question really had gotten answered. So I just wanted to make sure that that was there. To your question, there's at least 2 projects that I know of. One of them is called Diversity, higherdiversity.us, that's trying to be the glass door for various axes of non-straight, white, cisgender male. So hopefully the ecosystem gets better as we go on to have more of a like anonymous public venue to say, how is it like to be a trans person at this company? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to answer your question about folks who go through code school and what their job opportunities look like. From my experience, it looks like it's very hit and miss. It's very much dependent upon the hiring manager's opinion about what code school provides. I've worked with a lot of folks who have gone through code school and have been hired, and I have had no issues working with them, and I've tried very hard to get my own management to try and hire from code school. The feeling is that the folks that do not go through the whole CS program do not have the theory to be able to assess their, that is generally the feeling, is that you cannot learn about, memory management and, how bits and bytes work without going through a full CS program, which is bullcrap. So there definitely has to be that change in opinion at the management level. And the other thing I feel is that people who are from the majority population often get the benefit of the doubt. So if they had gone through code school, then they get hired because the opinion is that, well, they'll learn. But if it's anyone else that doesn't look like them, then there's a doubt, like, oh, I don't know if this person is going to be able to learn. So it very much depends upon the management.
Hi, I just wanted to add, I think it kind of adds to what you were talking about and also what you were talking about. My personal experience is like, as a 16-year-old, I was kicked out of home. And so I actually come to technology with 0 degrees, which I know in the States is very controversial, but where I'm from in Australia is actually not that unusual now. One of the really big biases I see is actually that like diverse people tend to move around a lot because we've all been in toxic jobs. And I see that there's like a lot of unconscious bias of people that go, they job hop a lot, and they don't accept that people get exposed to really toxic environments and have to leave. Yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
While Rob runs, I've also heard people say recently, well, if people have done boot camps, if they don't have much of a job history, I want to look at what they've done. I want to look at open source contributions. But you have to have the luxury of like eating and having a roof over your head to do that. So I'm not sure how we support that side of the argument.
So I wanted to mention also on the gaps on the CV thing. I think it's I'm an engineering manager, and I get a lot of the training for recruitment, and for phone screening, like at least we pass where people with gaps they go through the phone screening, but I get a lot from HR saying, okay, the first question you need to ask is why those gaps, and I think it's very important that we stop doing that, especially on the first phone screen, because it's like people don't even have the opportunity, or they're not ready to share why those gaps. And I think it's a very common thing on phone screening. The first thing to ask is why those gaps.
I want to tell everyone here I'm really appreciative of this conversation. I also want to touch base on the code school, code bootcamp aspect again. I was in the biotech sector, and I am a code bootcamp kid, and that's how I started my career in tech. I kind of hear like these concerns. I kind of half agree with them. I think a lot of the way, the way these boot camps are designed right now is to simply get people to be able to have a foot in the door. And that's sort of where I started. I started as a developer, and it was through a lot of mentoring, a lot of allowance from management for me to chase kind of my interest, where I was able to like dive into a little bit more systems level engineering, distributed systems theory, into DevOps, and work on this like incredibly complicated stuff, and become a contributor to really cool open source projects. And I think I'm lucky in that regard. I certainly have a lot of passing privilege, but for me, I wish there was a systemic way to approach this. For me, currently, it's equally important for me as like a senior engineer currently to reach back and identify interests in people who look like me, right? In order to like take an active stance in stepping into a mentoring role, and stepping into a role where I'm encouraging them, as well as like seeing their past job history, understanding the context of which they exist in this industry, and kind of like supporting their education and like moving laterally into these kinds of roles that they care about. I don't have like the greatest idea of like how to approach it systemically again, but like it's important for companies to understand that diversity has like a very tangible business value, and encouraging employees to be able to come through the front door, understanding that the context of their value proposition is more than just what shows up on their resume. It is like the whole of their experiences, and oftentimes that experience is non-traditional. And getting them to understand that and allow their employees to like have like some amount of like wiggle room, lateral movement through internal mentorship is important. And that's kind of all I have to say about it.
So one thing that I really like that my company does is we actually hire from coding boot camps, and we just give them extended mentorship periods. So instead of just like expecting them to come in out of college and know the world and be able to get familiar with systems, we're actually able to coach them a little bit longer and like get more hands-on experience. We've had tons of successful hires this way, and it's fantastic. So it could be something that other companies could look at adopting, but they have to understand that there is an investment there.
Thank you. And how long have we got?
Am I off? Okay, all but one of these is a raise your hands question anyway. So the pronoun stickers, how many use them? Cool. How many felt some discomfort about, how many didn't use them because you never do? Okay. Yeah, so on the there was an opportunity on the badges, which I can't point to mine right now, to put stickers with your preferred pronouns, and they're outside. If you're the last question, yeah, I'm wondering if so one of the things I complimented them. I love the fact they did them. My other question though was, are we kind of are we self-selectingly out and coming from some comfort of privilege to be able to put it out there? I'm wondering if something I saw in a job application recently, more power to them, which is having it as a badge question so that everybody gets pronouns on their badges wouldn't be a great idea. So that it's not, well, first of all, so it's common courtesy, but also that it's not, hey, I'm someone different. Go ahead.
I feel like you're having a leading question in this, and that you kind of have an answer that you'd like. And I agree that, yeah, absolutely. If we had it as KubeCon saying, we're going to print all badges with pronouns, whatever you chose through your registration, would normalize that. So.
How many of you would be interested in continuing this conversation somewhere? Okay. I don't have an answer today for how to do that, but we'll be in and out of the SUSE booth, and I will by tomorrow morning have something set up for there. But here's somebody who probably has an existing idea.
Sorry. The LGBTQIA Slack channel has the KubeCon channel in it. So yeah, if people wanted to join that channel, I think that would be a really good venue.
Thank you. Right, yeah. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming along and voicing your thoughts and opinions and questions. I think it's very important to have discussions, like this. Let's potentially use it as some momentum to drive that forward, say through the Slack channel there. And if you are in a position to, I do encourage you to submit sessions, even if it's something just as simple as this. Something which is pretty much no prep work required and letting you guys have the floor. And it's really important to have that discussion, I think, and raise awareness further. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.